Welcome to ParadoxWalk podcast, specializing in paranormal activity, UFOs, dream realities, glitches in the Matrix, anything unexplainable, cryptids, anything that makes you think. It's actually September 1st of 2022, and this, I believe, is episode 9, and I'll be talking about the ideas of time travel in a slightly different way. Hovering airplanes will be talked about. I'm talking like 747 jets that seem to stop in the middle of the air, and I don't even mean seem to stop, I mean actually stop. Some will go backwards. There's videos of this. I made a compilation myself on my music channel, Di Cello Piano. The video is called Rara Avis. It's spelled like Raravis, and I've gotten some positive feedback on it. People seem to like it. That's going to be talked about, and a person that's claims to have experienced bullet time where everything slows down. There's a few stories like that where one is a car accident where somebody gets hit, and they say it's not just them but the person next to them in the car when it got hit at like 90 miles an hour, and they said that they both were able to like adjust themselves as the car accident took place. They said it was like time stopped almost, like it was like super slow, and they could kind of move around in there and like take care of business in the car accident. So the first story here comes from a channel, and she only has like 2 videos. The channel is called Paper Druid, but she shares this dream. I'm gonna cut out a lot of it because for podcast sake, so I'll just get right to it. Quote, "I do want to share my super cool dream from last night. So yeah, last night I found myself as I was like a younger version of me, so around 11 or 12, and I was in this community, this facility, with all sorts of other people my age, but also older people as well. And it was like a secret society, and that's all I knew. I just found out I was getting promoted. I was moving up, whatever that meant. So my boss was there, and my boss sent me to the far side of this temple in this building. And I went into a small room with probably like 4x6 platform, kind of looking like a bed, but it wasn't a bed. It was definitely made out of wood, but it was completely white, and so was the room around me now. And I laid down on the platform and I shut my eyes, and when I opened them, I found myself transported to a very alien terrain. There was rocks, very rocky, desert-like, and all the rocks were kind of covered in this orange powdery mist. I walked through this terrain for a little bit, and then I come upon a woman. She was going somewhere. She was definitely on a mission. So I followed her, and we came to what happens to be her ship. I walk up, and that's when I'm lucid. So I'm going to explain like the drawing because it's kind of weird. So she draws this like dark black, like she later calls it like this basketball size thing. And then around it, like when this thing gets turned on, it looks like the Israeli flag, like the triangle with another triangle, like an inverted triangle superimposed over a regular triangle or whatever. So that's like the picture she holds up. She calls it like a basketball thing. But when she walked up to this woman, she started to realize she was dreaming. So there were no triggers or anything, but there's this information about this woman in the dream. So I became lucid, and she's standing across from me, and there's this ship. So then she holds up the picture. And then when I experienced it, but there was this ship here, she called it the Flyer. Now, it was no bigger than a basketball. It was like this big, and then she holds up her hands like a basketball size, and it hovered around the ground, and it seemed to be moving like a liquid mirror. I could see my reflection in it, and it was hovering above the ground now. And yeah, she called it the Flyer. I was like, how the heck are we going to get in this thing? It's really small. So she said that we had to go. We were on a mission, and we were headed somewhere. So we both put our hands on it, each on both sides, and then it let out this type of energy. And when the energy, it was like, and then she makes this noise with her mouth like a wave. It came out of the top, and it spread out around the Flyer and created a force field that protected us. But it was bigger than it looked. I don't know if this was like the engine, like we're on both sides of it, and it completely encompassed us to us, and then we blast off through space. Like, it was overwhelming. It's hard to describe the sensations and the imagery, but it was very, very cool. And we came to a planet. I don't know if it was Earth. I don't know if it was the present or the future or the past, but it was like very cool. And we were in this like an ice tundra. It was a flat plain, and there was a huge ice wall, and on the far side of it and below us as we were flying over the top, it was like we were moving through time really, really fast. And what was happening below us was moving at a slower rate because everything was in slow motion. There's this great battle happening with all sorts of different alien races. And it was just below us. And you're quite up high in the air. And then we flew over to the top of the ice wall and we landed the flyer and we got out. There's an infinite plane, very peculiar about it, but it was infinite. And I knew I was dreaming, but it was very present, like baffled and amazed. And I asked her, "What is this place?" And the woman told me, "Lacey," that's the girl's name that has the YouTube channel, "time is not linear." And so I pondered that as I looked over this vast infinite wall of ice, and I realized I was kind of starting to wake up. And she had this device with her, like coordinates device, and it was like this little like interface that kind of popped up and it had a map or coordinates, and I knew she was on this great mission. I was like, okay, I gotta think quick before I gotta like ask her something before I wake up. This is my chance. So I look at her and I go, "What's your name?" And she's like, "My name is Valerie, and we've met before." I shook her hand like before I woke up, and like I held her hand and we locked eyes. I saw her face, and she was so real. She had piercing blue eyes. She had quite a deep scars on her face and very weathered. She was an older woman. She had blonde hair. It was up in a ponytail. It was just unreal to me why this dream came to me like in this super cool ship, and I got to experience that. And so she's saying she hopes she has more adventures or something like that. But I thought that was pretty wild because the lady was like, "Yeah, we're traveling in time. Time is not linear." I heard people say that it's like an album, like the old-fashioned type albums, or like a DVD where you can pick your spot or something if you have the right tech. So with the time travel stuff, remember the movie, the first one, Back to the Future, and they're trying to catch a bolt of lightning and connect it to the car, and that would get it back. Remember that? So I bring that up because there's a case. Peter Williamson is a disappearance case from 1974. This was in England. And this reminds me of the Back to the Future movie where they'd have to catch a bolt of lightning to make the car go back in time. Well, forward in time, back to where they came from. So it started off with his dog being stuck in the rain, but he had a bunch of people at the house, like some sort of party. And it's Peter and his wife. They started a barbecue in the garden, and it was a summer's day, and a big thunderstorm started coming in with a lot of lightning. I'm just going to start reading this, and I'll tell you the author of the books. It's just a little excerpt. The Williamsons noticed that their dog was cowering under a tree. Spooked perhaps by the strange atmosphere, Peter decided to take the animal back indoors, but as he went towards it, there was a huge flash. The next moment, to his wife's horror, Peter had vanished. Despite a massive search, there was no sign of the missing man. What the guests said was that they were actually watching him go get the dog when the lightning struck, either nearby or him directly, and he just disappeared. You know, they kind of described where he was, and they were like, you couldn't, it wasn't something you could just jump over in 2 seconds. 3 days later, Peter was found unconscious in a shrubbery, which is like a bush, like bushes, in a locked garden nearby, with 1 foot in a pond. It was as if he arrived there out of nowhere. There was no sign of how he got into the area where the gardener who found him, because the gardener had the only key. Peter spent several days in the hospital suffering from shock and had no recall of what had taken place. Then Peter began to experience increasingly lucid dreams. He saw himself standing in an unfamiliar garden, soaking wet, and wandering along roads, dazed and confused. In his dream, he was found and eventually taken to a hospital. Here, he'd spent some time undergoing tests. He was able to recall the names of the doctor, a sister, like a nun who worked there, various nurses, and the ward where he was cared for. He also remembered how the hospital would shimmer around him in a sort of haze, and furniture would appear in places where none had previously stood, and then the ward would return to normal. As Peter's condition improved in this dream hospital, he was allowed to go out for a walk around the grounds. Going down a lane outside, Peter began to get a sense of familiarity. Then there was no further recall until he awoke by the pond. The hospital Peter described was traced, and it was a cottage infirmary nearby. It had a ward, it had a doctor, and a sister slash nun with the names Peter had reported. The doctor did not, so he actually goes there in real life, and the doctor did not recognize Peter, and the hospital record showed that he never stayed there. It was suggested that he must have invented his dream from fragments of information lurking in his subconscious. I mean, and then they put in parentheses, perhaps a conversation once heard about the hospital. Usually people would remember something like that, but anyway, that's just my 2 cents. I'm going to continue on quoting this book. Quote, "But is that the real explanation? Or during this electrical storm, did Peter shift into a parallel reality?" There's a channel, if somebody likes my channel, they're going to love Beyond Creepy as well. And recently he covered this case, which made me look up this book. And what happens on the Beyond Creepy channel is him, Mr. Black, he's the narrator of Beyond Creepy, finds a secondary person that investigated this case. And there was also some strange things where Peter Williamson also borrowed clothes from his hospital roommate, and they showed up in his closet in real life. So they tried to do this like trace analysis on the tags and the clothes and the material and stuff like that. And it just gets, this case is so bizarre that it can't even, just goes in circles, and it's almost kind of frustrating to look at it too long. But to me, the only thing I wanted to emphasize was the lightning. So the book that I read from is called Time Storms by Jenny Randles. She does more. She has more about this case, but like I said before, I don't want to spend the whole podcast on this one case and move on to the next story. Now, I also recall, I look up like not just like weird paranormal and supernatural cases, but I look up dreams of people that share dreams, especially like lucid dreams. But every once in a while, they'll branch off into something else. And one dream that I saw one time was this lady that had a dream of a big storm. And she said there was a lot of lightning, but there was more lightning than like a normal big storm. And in her dream, she said that the lightning, and keep in mind, this is a dream, so I don't know what this means or whatever. I'm not some expert in dream analysis, but she said that the lightning was so intense, the storm was so powerful, and the lightning was so beyond normal that the sky would glitch out like a computer having an error, like when it has like too much stuff in like video rendering, and when the lightning would strike, the sky would glitch out and like big pieces of it would glitch out like a computer glitching. I wonder if that's her dream has some kind of foresight into, what if lightning actually can change time and stuff. I mean, isn't that what they say in the Bible, like how Lucifer fell? He fell as a bolt of lightning. Maybe lightning has this characteristic of transferring somebody or something into another realm, look at the three things we have here. We have Peter Williamson disappearing and going to another realm with a lightning bolt. The movie Back to the Future, we had to, time travel was only possible with the lightning bolt or the energy from a lightning bolt. The other thing was the show Mr. Robot. Whenever they showed this nuclear power plant, they showed underneath it, the nuclear power plant wasn't powering a city as much as it was being the basis of the energy for a particle accelerator. And the particle accelerator in the movie, I don't want to give away the movie, but, click ahead if you're like in the early stages of Mr. Robot. But what happened in the show Mr. Robot was the nuclear power plant was really the energy for particle accelerators, and they were doing things to reverse time. They actually used it so if somebody died, they would turn on the particle accelerator, and then they would just come back to a different realm. So there's that, and then this dream of somebody saying like the lightning was so powerful that it glitched the sky out. So that's that. If you want to look into Peter Williamson more, go to the Beyond Creepy channel, and I think the video is called A Realm Like Ours. I looked for this story and I couldn't find it. So I'm going to just tell it by memory, and forgive me if I don't have every single fact and every single detail. It starts with this guy saying he was working on things in his garage, and I believe, if I remember right, he was working on like batteries, making his own batteries or making his own sort of power. Like he was building these things himself, and he described it something that was explosive if he connected something the wrong way. In his story, he connected something that he knew was going to explode, and he describes this like split second moment where he connected